Mariana used to have two concerns when it came to holidays: making it to all the invitations and choosing an outfit that would make her look different everywhere and get her noticed. Now, she has only one concern: understanding why her phone has been silent for weeks, as if someone switched her off along with the lights in this new chapter of her life. People have disappeared, friends seem to have vanished, and gatherings have become so rare that they're remembered like old postcards in the attic. Mariana spent a long time looking for explanations. Maybe she had become too old for fun company, too serious for light conversations, or simply too easy to forget. You could come up with dozens of reasons, but the main question remained: what to do next? One day, sitting by the window and watching the late snow fall silently on the sidewalks, Mariana realized to remain silent any longer meant agreeing, and agreeing was not her style. She found several ways to regain interest in herself and once again become part of the living real world. And today, we'll tell you exactly how to do it. And believe me, it doesn't require trying to look younger, applying makeup like a schoolgirl, or learning TikTok dances. It's much simpler, and if you want, much more fun. If you feel that this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, we talk about things that really matter, about how to not lose your zest for life, no matter what age we are. Before, if Mariana accidentally disappeared for a couple of weeks, a search would begin, like in a bad detective novel. Where has she gone? Why isn't she calling? Her acquaintances would ask, as if she were a rare pearl that had suddenly fallen out of a necklace. Now she could disappear for a month, and the most she would hear was a weak, "Oh, we thought you were at a sanatorium." Why does this happen? Why do people who used to pull you to gatherings now stay silent, as if someone turned off the sound at the other end of the line? There could be many reasons, but most often, it's much more trivial than it seems at first glance. First, people don't become mean or cruel. They become busy. Some have new jobs, some have new families, some have a new habit, complaining about being tired. They're not plotting against you. They're just too absorbed in themselves. And let's be honest, each of us has at least once forgotten to call someone who was waiting. It's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. Second, social expectations change with age. When you're 20, you're expected everywhere. At parties, at birthdays, at spontaneous tea parties with neighbors. At 70, everyone starts to think that you want peace and quiet, that it's hard for you to go anywhere, that maybe it's better not to bother you. And that's where the most insidious thing begins. The silence is polite, kind, but it hurts even more. Have you noticed how some friends have started to communicate with you as if you were a porcelain figurine? They ask with forced concern, "Are you sure you can handle it? Won't you get tired?" And in their eyes, fear. Fear of offending, fear of doing something wrong, fear of facing what they themselves are afraid of. Aging, loneliness, the temporary nature of all living things. And one more important observation that is rarely spoken aloud. Sometimes people are put off not by your age, not by your wrinkles, but by your mood. Pain, resentment, fatigue, all of this is read without words. If only sadness is heard in the conversation, if your face more often resembles a page of obituaries than an invitation to life, people begin to intuitively avoid such communication. Not because they are bad, but because everyone is looking for a place where they can warm up, not freeze even more. Mariana remembered her friend Greta. Greta was 80, and every time she walked into a cafe, heads would turn in her direction. She might be covered in wrinkles, with a ridiculous scarf around her neck, and glasses that were more suitable for a chemistry teacher than a socialite. But her laughter, ringing, slightly ironic, made people involuntarily smile back. Greta was always invited, even when she could hardly hear, even when she had to lean on a cane, because she radiated warmth, lightness, and humor, because she herself radiated life, not anticipation. So, if you're asking yourself the question, why am I no longer invited? Ask yourself honestly, what am I radiating? What do people feel around me? This is not an accusation. This is an invitation to look at yourself from a different perspective, because it's possible to change the situation. And not by putting on a mask of eternal youth or pretending to be someone else. The main thing is to understand. The world around us is arranged in such a way that if you yourself start to seem invisible to yourself, soon others will also stop noticing you. And now that we have honestly looked in the mirror, we can move on. How to be a part of celebrations, life, joy again, without clowning around, without breaking yourself, and without dancing on camera for someone else's approval. Next, I'll tell you how Mariana took the first step, and how everyone can take this step. Because regaining interest in yourself is not the art of the young, it's the art of the living. Mariana understood a simple truth that, for some reason, many are afraid to admit. If you're not being invited, invite yourself. No, it's not humiliating. It's a grown-up, beautiful game where you are the main conductor. And the conductor, as you know, comes on stage when everyone else is just tuning their instruments. Instead of sitting by the window and counting other people's parties on social media, she decided to become the reason for a gathering herself. And not to prove something to someone, but for herself, for those who still remember what it's like to gather around one table, laugh, argue, and feel alive again. You'll say, but what if no one comes? That's the right question, and here's an honest answer to it. Yes, it may happen that not everyone will come. Maybe only 2 or 3 people will come. Maybe the first time you'll have to do all the cooking yourself, set the cups, and listen to polite excuses. But you know what? Even a couple of warm voices at your table are better than 100 silent contacts in your phone. And those who come are exactly the people who really need you, and that's worth more than a room full of boring obligations. Mariana started small. She invited her old friend from painting classes and her neighbor from the 5th floor, the one who was always complaining about the entrance door not closing. They met on Saturday for tea, without fancy outfits, without stress. They just set the table, a couple of pies, a couple of stories, a couple of jokes about how Mariana once ran away from her graduation party in her youth to eat hot dogs at the train station. It seemed like a small thing, but by the end of the evening, they were laughing so hard that the neighbors downstairs were knocking on the ceiling. The main thing is to choose the right format for the meeting. Don't try to throw a banquet for 30 people with an orchestra and an ice sculpture in the middle. You don't need the fuss that will exhaust you even before the holiday begins. Small get-togethers are an art. It's when coziness is more important than scale, when laughter sounds louder than the number of guests. Try starting with a themed tea party. For example, memories of travels, where everyone brings a crazy travel story, or an evening of favorite books. No need to give lectures, just have everyone talk about a book that once saved them. Want something really light? Organize a funny stories day. I guarantee that by the end of the meeting, everyone's stomach will hurt from laughing, even if someone has been hurting everywhere else for a long time. You can customize the format. Love to cook? Organize a mini tasting of homemade dishes. Love movies? Put on an old good comedy and watch it together. The main thing is to give people not only a reason to come, but also a reason to stay, to want to return. And here's another important thought that comes only with experience. Don't be afraid if someone says no or can't come. A refusal is not about you. It's about their busyness, fears, laziness, the weather, the neighbor's cat, anything. Your value doesn't diminish from someone else's no. It's confirmed by your own yes to life, to communication, to moving forward. So, if you feel that the world has become too quiet around you, organize your own celebration. Even if there are only 3 people at the first party, and one of them just ran in for salt by accident, it is from such evenings that life is rebuilt. And next, we'll talk about how to expand this circle and find those with whom you really want to move forward, where to look for new people, and how to make life filled with voices again. After the first get-togethers, Mariana felt a strange emptiness. It seemed that the evening was a success. The pies were eaten completely. The neighbors took away pieces of warmth. But something inside suggested, this is not enough. As if one candle doesn't replace a whole chandelier. And then she realized, in order to feel life again, one small company is not enough. You need a breath of fresh air, new faces, new stories, new reasons to gather, not because you have to, but because you want to. If old friends have disappeared or faded into the background, it's not a tragedy. It's just a map that needs to be updated. And instead of being sad over an old atlas where the roads have been erased, it's worth drawing new routes. But where to find these people? How to find new interlocutors when it seems that the whole world has long since sorted out their friendships, companies, and family ties? There are actually more options than it seems. Look around. Almost every neighborhood has clubs, courses, and circles of interest. And no, it's not just about knitting napkins or culinary masterclasses for dreary housewives. Today, you can find groups for studying art history, book clubs, painting lessons, gardening, chess evenings, and meetings for travel enthusiasts. Violetta, an old acquaintance of Mariana's, signed up for the City Club Movies and Conversations, where they showed old movies once a week and discussed them over a cup of tea. In 6 months, she made more new friends than in the last 10 years. And yes, among them were those who were 20 years younger, peers, and even a former French teacher with whom she now shared the best pieces of pie at friendly get-togethers. Or here's another path, volunteering. Mariana initially brushed it aside, saying, where would she go with her joints? But then she still went to a volunteer meeting at the local library. They needed people to help organize children's readings and exhibitions. And suddenly it turned out that discussing fairy tales with grandchildren and their parents could be not just work, but joy. A real bridge to new acquaintances. And have you ever wondered how many interesting people live literally in the next building? How many stories are hidden behind each door? Sometimes it's enough to smile on the staircase or linger in a conversation on the bench by the entrance, and the acquaintance will begin on its own. And here it's important to remember, new connections should not be massive. You don't need to look for a crowd. 1 or 2 people with whom you really want to sit in silence or laugh to tears is enough. The main thing is to be open to meetings, not to wait for the perfect moment, not to think, I'm already too old for this. Because old age is not about the number of years. It's about what a person forbids themselves. And now, a little secret. When you start to expand your social map, life starts to throw the right people at you. You just have to take the first step. And in the next part, we'll talk about how to take care of yourself so that at any age you start to attract attention again, calmly, without fuss and falsehood. How to become someone who you want to invite not out of politeness, but from a sincere desire. Believe me, it's much more interesting than just sitting and waiting for a call. If you like this conversation, if you find something for yourself here, like this video, it will help other people who are also looking for warmth and support to find us. And for you, it's a small but important action to say to yourself, I choose life. When Mariana looked back on her life, she felt a little sad. Everything that used to fill her days with meaning, work, family cares, endless to-do lists, suddenly disappeared. It was as if someone turned off the music, and the room immediately became too big and too quiet. She asked herself, what would I do if I didn't have to rush anywhere, didn't have to prove anything to anyone? What really warms my soul and not just fills the time? The answer didn't come right away. At first, there was a strange feeling, as if you need to learn again to choose for yourself and not because you have to. But then one day, passing by the park, she saw a group of people who were painting autumn trees, and she realized she had wanted to try it for a long time, just for herself. Without exhibitions, without evaluations, without obligations, just for the pleasure. And you know what the main secret is? When a person is doing something that they are really interested in, they become a magnet. They start to shine. And everyone around sees this light, without any special effort. Remember any acquaintance who is passionate about their work. Remember how they talk about their projects, how their eyes light up. Do you want to turn away from such a person? No. You want to be near, to catch this energy, to share your own. And so did Mariana. At first, she just bought watercolors. Then she signed up for a short course for beginners. Not for a diploma, but for pleasure. And soon she noticed that conversations with new acquaintances began to revolve around her new hobby on their own. Someone brought her old books on painting. Someone invited her on joint walks for sketching. Life began to grow with new threads, almost imperceptibly. And here's an important point. A hobby should be yours. Not fashionable, not approved by someone from above. Not what is decent at your age. Want to grow violets? Grow them. Want to learn to play the harmonica? For God's sake. Want to knit sweaters for dogs? Why not? The main thing is that it makes you want to get up in the morning, not force yourself. Some of Mariana's acquaintances initially laughed. Paints? At 72? You'd better watch a TV show. But then they were the ones who started coming to her for advice. How to choose brushes, where to buy paper, how to feel a zest for life again when it seems that all the most interesting things are behind you. Because a real passion is contagious. It heals loneliness better than any pills and invitations out of politeness. It makes you a person that people are drawn to, not because they pity you, but because they want to be around you. And here again, it's worth asking yourself the question, what have I always wanted to try but postponed? What warmed my heart back when life was just beginning? The answer may surprise you. Sometimes something you've long forgotten is hidden behind it. And next, we'll talk about how to show those around you this inner light of yours. How to stop being invisible, not by reminding yourself with screams and requests, but simply by being real, alive, attractive. Believe me, there's no magic in this, only small, simple steps that everyone can take. After Mariana found new hobbies and a small but warm circle of friends, it suddenly became clear to her that alone was still not enough. Although life was filled with new colors, a shadow remained in her heart. The feeling that the world still saw not a person in her, but a silhouette, as if she had become visible again to a few people, but remained invisible to the big world. And then Mariana wondered, what if she stopped hiding, not waiting for someone to guess how much life was still in her, how much strength, laughter, kind words, and stories were still in her heart that could warm someone else? But what if she just took and went out into the world, calmly, without any overdoing it, without fear of being inappropriate? In her youth, this seemed self-evident. Every step was like an application to the world. Here I am, look at me. Over the years, this application becomes quieter, more cautious, and sometimes disappears altogether. But the ability to assert yourself doesn't go away. It just needs to be reawakened. Mariana started small. She made it a rule to visit places where people gathered at least once a week. Not in order to necessarily meet someone or immediately start conversations, but just to be part of life. She went to exhibitions at the local cultural center, even if she didn't know any of the organizers. Sometimes she went to literary evenings at the library where they read poetry. Sometimes she just sat in the park during the hours when young mothers with children, old people with their dogs, and lovers with their dreams were walking there. And you know what's surprising? When you stop hiding, the world starts to see you. When you smile at a stranger in a bookstore, they almost always smile back. When you have a short conversation with a seller at the market about the ripeness of apples, it seems like a trifle, but it is from such moments that a new feeling is built. I am a living person among living people. Sometimes Mariana simply took her watercolor notebook with her to the park and drew. She didn't put on showy performances, didn't wave her brushes for show. But people came up on their own. Someone asked what she was drawing. Someone just smiled passing by. And each such glance, each word was a small thread that reconnected her with this big world. And here it's worth saying honestly, sometimes it will be scary. Sometimes you'll want to hide again. In the silence, in the cozy walls of your apartment, in the television, in the book. This is normal. It's important to remember that public activity is not about noisy parties or mandatory conversations with just anyone. It's about inner openness, about allowing the world to notice you again. And for this, you don't need to become someone else. You don't need to change your appearance, style of clothing, or habits. It's enough to be yourself. Alive, curious, a little bit brave. It's enough not to look away first. It's enough once to say in response to someone else's smile, "What a nice day, isn't it?" Mariana remembered how, in her youth, she could talk to anyone, in the bread line, at the bus stop, in the park. Then it seemed natural. Why not regain this right? The right to be part of life simply because you want to participate in it. And it was precisely in these moments, when she began to feel herself among people again, and not apart from them, that an amazing lightness returned to her. That very lively interest in the world and in herself returned. And with each day, there were more and more reasons for someone to want to invite her to a meeting, offer to go to an exhibition together, or just sit on that same bench in the park to share news or tell a funny story. And next, we'll talk about how to strengthen this inner strength. How to feel like a whole, fulfilled person, even in solitude. Because being interesting to others begins with being interesting to yourself. And believe me, this is not some philosophical abstraction. This is a real, tangible practice that everyone can master. Shall we continue? When new faces, conversations, laughter, and invitations began to appear in her life again, Mariana suddenly noticed one important thing. All this really makes the days brighter, fills them with movement, joy, and meaning. But real strength, a real sense of support, comes from something completely different. Not calls, not meetings, not attention from others, but what you yourself think about yourself when you are alone with yourself. At first, it seemed to her that the more activity, the easier it would be to get rid of loneliness, but she quickly realized if there is emptiness inside, no external events will be able to patch up this emptiness. You can run from one meeting to another, you can sign up for all the events in the area, but if there is silence and dull fatigue from yourself inside, no noisy companies will save you. And then Mariana took the step that many consider the most difficult. She began to deal with who she really is, without unnecessary fuss, without dramatic conversations with friends about lost years, without trying to find the guilty. She just sat down one day at the kitchen table, brewed tea, and asked herself, what really pleases me? What am I dreaming about right now and not 20 years ago? Who am I now when I no longer owe anything to anyone? These questions may sound simple, almost mundane, but answering them is not easy, because behind the usual routine, whether it's caring for children, grandchildren, or work, it's easy to lose yourself. It's easy to forget that you are not only a mother, grandmother, neighbor, or colleague, that you are a separate story that deserves to be continued. Mariana began to collect her new self piece by piece. She allowed herself to dream again, not about the great and grandiose, but about the simple. She wanted to finally learn to play the old piano that stood in the corner and that no one had paid attention to for a long time. She decided to go alone to a city where she had never been, just to walk the streets where no one knows her. She began to write down her thoughts in a small notebook, not for the public, not for articles, but just to hear herself. And with each small step, she became stronger, not louder, not brighter for others, but deeper and calmer for herself. It was work not to surprise someone or to prove her usefulness to someone. It was building a house inside herself, a house that you can always return to, even if the whole world suddenly becomes quiet again. And you know what happened next? When a person finds such inner support, when they become interesting to themselves, those around them begin to feel it. People seem to be drawn to those who know how to be happy on their own. This is a completely different level of communication, not out of need, not out of fear of being alone, but out of real pleasure in being near. Mariana was no longer afraid that someone would not invite her to the next holiday. Because she knew the holiday now lives inside her, and if someone wants to share it with her, great, and if not, then she will still have someone to raise a glass to, herself, her path, her new, real life. And if it suddenly seems to you that time has passed, that the doors have slammed shut, that there will be no more invitations, remember Mariana. The invitation to life always begins with you. Thank you for being with us today. If this story was warm, important, or at least a little bit bright for you, don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell. There will be many more stories here that remind us, as long as we are alive, we still have a future.